Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, as Brexit talks continue, UK academics warn about a lack of focus on food security. Also this week, South Korea's new president bans photos on CVs as the job application process gets a makeover. Plus the techniques technology companies use to keep us online for longer as the sector pushes past a dot-com era record. For the past year, we've heard quite a lot about Brexit, the UK's decision to divorce from the European Union. But when round two of talks kicked off this week, the big issue was the cost. How much will Britain have to cough up for 44 years of EU membership? There's a lot of noise about what's likely to be a very big divorce bill, but there's been relative silence about one issue since the Brexit referendum, the future of the UK's food security. A new report published by the University of Sussex this week calls this lack of focus astonishing. It warns that British consumers haven't been informed about the implications for agriculture and farming. Food is the largest single UK manufacturing sector, and 1/3 of its workforce comes from overseas. 1/3, too, of Britain's food comes from within the European Union. Well, access to fishing waters is also an issue that will be impacted by Brexit. For Dutch fishermen, that could mean losing half their catch. Fleur Lansbach reports from a fishing town in the Netherlands.
For generations, Dutch fishermen have been crossing to the other side of the North Sea to catch their fish. But with the UK preparing to leave the European Union and already withdrawing from international treaties, they fear they'll be denied access to their traditional fishing grounds. Cor Lokker's family business has been fishing there for over 50 years.
Our seas are already very small, and with Brexit taking effect, it looks as though there won't be much left for us to fish.
The recent decision by the British government to pull out of the 1964 Fishery Convention that allows other European countries to fish between 6 and 12 miles from its coast is seen as the first step to close more waters for fishing boats coming from outside of the UK. Britain's Environment Minister Michael Gove stated,
"When we leave the European Union, we'll become an independent coastal state, and that means we can then extend control over our waters to 200 miles, or the median line between Britain and France or Britain and Ireland."
Of all the countries surrounding the North Sea, the Netherlands depends most on British waters for fish.
About half of the fish here come from British waters. But with fisheries being an important part of the Brexit negotiations, many of these fishermen are worried about their future.
The majority of the British catch is exported to the European market. Access the UK does not want to lose in a Brexit deal. Dutch fishery associations are urging their British neighbours to continue to share their waters.
These are the British waters, the blue line. We take about 80% of our herring here in the waters close to Scotland. We have been fishing herring in that part of the North Sea since the 1400s. So we talk about, well, not decades, but really ages. I mean, herring is one of the food items which is mostly, well, it defines a little bit the identity of the Dutch food, partly, herring.
Nee, hoort bij Nederland.
Herring is really part of the Netherlands.
It's not just fish, it's the whole cultural thing behind it.
According to fisherman Cor Lokker, the sea was once seen as shared territory.
40 years ago, it used to be more friendly.
But for Dutch fishermen, the tides may be about to turn.
Joining us now from London, David Coker. David's a lecturer in finance at the University of Westminster. David, good to have you with us. How real, then, is the threat of food insecurity for Britain post-Brexit?
Well, we have to understand that currently we've got a degree of food insecurity because we're relying so much upon the European Union for our food. We import anywhere from between 27 to about 30% of produce from the European Union, and anyone who lives in England who has a healthy diet has seen the effects of disruption already, going back to January when there were storms in Murcia, Spain, that disrupted a lot of the fields. So I think post-Brexit, we'll be in better shape because we'll be able to negotiate trade deals with other areas, other geographic areas that can give us the diversity that we need to prevent future disruption.
How easy is that to do, though, quickly?
Well, President Trump has gone on record as saying a deal with the with the UK could happen very, very quickly. And also, NAFTA renegotiations have just opened up in Washington. They're going to take the seats on August 16th. And we feel that there could be a case put forward by the Americans at that point for the UK to join NAFTA. And this is nothing new. These ideas have been mooted since the 90s. And in fact, there's been articles written about the possibility of the UK joining NAFTA, which is a much larger bloc than the EU. And it doesn't come with a lot of the negative things or things that people find negative about EU membership specifically. It's purely and simply a trading bloc.
The European Union, though, has pretty strict safety standards as far as food and produce are concerned. The US, I mean, it's widely known, has lower standards in some areas. Will that be a problem, do you think? Will people be exposed to chemicals and pesticides that they wouldn't otherwise have been exposed to if the food had been coming from the European Union?
Oh, that's a very good point. You're absolutely correct. We know that the United States has many problems with less biosecurity. We also know that with factory farming of animals, there's less concern for welfare, and they tend to populate the pens much larger than we do in the UK or European Union. Now, what we could do is by negotiating trading agreements with the U.S., we could, much like the U.S. raised Mexican standards of food when they started trading with the United States, I feel that the UK could have a positive impact upon the United States in the sense that some producers of food, in order to trade with the UK post-Brexit, will have to adopt these very, very stringent standards that the UK and the EU have collectively designed. And in fact, they are some of the most strongest in the world. So it's entirely possible.
Wouldn't that be like tail wagging dog, though? I mean, the rest of the North America Free Trade Association countries are much, much bigger than the UK.
Absolutely. We're looking at GDP across NAFTA of roughly 22 trillion compared to UK GDP. But if they want to trade, then they have to trade according to certain agreements that we put in place. It doesn't mean that all NAFTA for food production would be switched to UK/EU standards, but definitely some of the producers would. And this wouldn't go unnoticed across the wider trading bloc, that there's food that's food that's produced to a much higher standard and sold to the UK post-Brexit. And we feel that it would tend to raise standards in NAFTA.
What about the issue of farm subsidies, David? Would British farmers be better or worse off if they were trading more with North America than they were with Europe?
Right now, we get farm subsidies via the EU, and they're distributed by DEFRA in the form of CAP. Now, we feel that the UK post-Brexit definitely will maintain those subsidies. Let's look at it this way. It's in the UK's best interest to have a very strong agricultural sector. They're not going to do anything that will destroy the viability of British farming.
OK, David, good to talk to you. Many thanks indeed.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Adrian.
Now, getting a job can be a challenge for young people in South Korea, where the youth unemployment rate is running at higher than 10%. Many potential employers ask candidates to include a photo with their application, making the process even more competitive in a country that's obsessed with appearance. Now, President Moon Jae-in is trying to change that practice with a campaign called Blind Hiring. Kathy Novak reports.
Lights, camera, job interview. Or at least that's the hope for Koo Ji-eun. She's looking for a new role and says most companies will ask her to submit a photo with her application. So she wants to make sure it's a good one.
When I write a resume, they need a photo, and the appearance is very important. That's why I came here.
She's even enlisted the help of image consultant Chon Ye-seol. Koo says the last time she applied for jobs, every company except one asked for a headshot, and the company that didn't was the only one that invited her to interview. It's no wonder Chon says many of her clients are insecure about their looks.
They feel like the reason why they didn't get a job is their appearance. So they really worried about their face. I mean, they want to do plastic surgery, and they do want to change everything.
To understand more about why image is so important here, we asked a face reader.
I have the eyebrows of a journalist.
There's a belief in South Korea that a person's face is a window into one's destiny. And because some recruiters believe a face can hint at what kind of employee a candidate will be, they ask face readers to sit on their interview panels.
The purpose of recruitment is to find talented people, not just to fill empty positions. Face reading is a good tool for that.
Asking employers to look beyond a job seeker's face could be a big ask in a country where beauty is everywhere, but the government is trying to do just that.
South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in, says an applicant's looks, family background, or hometown shouldn't be factors in a job application. He's moving to change hiring practices in this extremely image-conscious society, starting with the public sector, and he's hoping private companies follow suit.
The first step is getting rid of photos on applications. This recruiter-turned-professor says it will not only be fairer for job seekers, but will also help businesses find more suitable candidates.
A lot of students have been spending money polishing their looks instead of advancing their skills, and that is a big problem that I hope we can get rid of.
But for now, Koo Ji-eun wants to give the best possible first impression when applying for her dream job, and she hopes some creative airbrushing can't hurt.
Still to come on Counting the Cost, a new frontier for space memorabilia. Neil Armstrong's bag that brought back first pieces of the moon goes under the hammer. But first, oil production in southern Nigeria is at its highest level in the last 2 years, but that comes at a cost. There's growing anger over pollution that's affecting local communities, an anger that's now threatening stability in the region. Al Jazeera's Ahmed Idris reports from the Niger Delta.
They've waited for more than 20 years for their homes, ponds and rivers to be decontaminated. A truce reached between the government and fighters disrupting oil production may soon be tested. Some communities are accusing the Nigerian government of reneging on its promise to clean up and tackle problems of development in the region. Leaders who helped the government to make the original deal say they have been put in a difficult situation.
We want direction, we want action to be matched with their words. That is what will bring about lasting peace. The people might be hungry. What they can do can just be imagined.
It's no longer certain how long the angry youths can be contained.
It is also for everyone to understand that every human being has a period that is okay, I'm impatient up to this while, I don't think I've got not to be patient. So something has to be done to cushion the sufferings of these people. That is the only way you can talk about the unity of Nigeria.
For now, people across the region and the country are watching the government's moves. No oil production activity has taken place here in Ogoniland since 1993, but the pollution stretches as far as the eye can see across this 1,000 square kilometer area. Beneath the soil, across farms, the rivers and streams lie some old oil pipelines that communities say still leak crude oil into the environment. That is the price Nigeria's Delta region is paying after more than half a century of oil production. At noon, the Bidere fishing community welcomes Barry home with his catch. He left 30 hours before, and this is all he got.
It's because of the oil. That's why this fish is small, because of this oil, yeah. And there's no other fish, only this type. Now we see, and now we see them for that side now.
Throughout the Delta, there are signs of devastation. The Nigerian government says the delay in its response to cleanup is not intentional.
We are not in for a shoddy job. We are not in to do something that will not meet international standards.
Beyond the threat to life if violence resumes, Nigerians already suffering through the country's longest and worst recession could pay a heavy economic price.
The second quarter earnings season continues to steam ahead. Under the spotlight this week, Netflix, the maker of House of Cards. The company is spending $6 billion a year on self-produced original content. It's positioning to be the world's biggest streaming video service. Despite criticism recently over the standard of that content, the company added 5.2 million new subscribers worldwide in the last 3 months. That's helped shares up 50% so far this year. US technology stocks have surged past their dot-com bubble peak. The S&P 500 technology sector broke through the near two-decade-old record to hit a new all-time high on Wednesday. The transformation of the industry over the past 17 years has been significant, and the companies themselves are becoming increasingly profitable. The sector's increased profits by 18% in the first 3 months of 2017 from a year earlier, according to FactSet data. Microsoft was the second largest tech company in existence back in March 2000, but it's had to reinvent itself since then and shift focus away from its dying personal computer business. Microsoft's net income more than doubled to a better than expected $6.51 billion in the most recent quarter. It's profiting from cloud computing, selling web-based services to businesses. Microsoft is now the second biggest player worldwide behind Amazon in cloud services. Now, the current earnings season is likely to continue to shine more light on just how profitable some of the biggest names in technology really are. The tech giants are benefiting from how much time the rest of us spend online. Our online addiction has increased dramatically since the dot-com era. Internet users worldwide now spend on average 2 hours plus per day on social media and messaging services alone. Now, the internet is capturing more and more of our time each day. Our connected lives drive digital advertising revenues, and people are beginning to ask whether all of this is good for our mental health. Joining us now from London, Matthew Knight. Matthew is the head of strategy and innovation at Cara, a global media agency. Good to have you with us, Matthew. So is digital addiction a thing now? It's not as if there are illicit chemicals involved.
Maybe not illicit, but certainly the response in the brain creates the sense of addiction as well from all of these alerts and notifications. So yes, I think it's very close to addiction, and 1 in 3 people in the UK are claiming that they're quite concerned about actually this as an issue.
So is big data, the companies that we are using every day on the internet, Facebook, Twitter, Google, do they know this? Are they using strategies to keep us online longer?
Ultimately, yes. I mean, I think the reality is that the media landscape is completely fractured. There are so many more ways of communicating with your friends and family, and equally the way in which brands and products interact with you. It's not the old days where it was just television or radio or newspapers. Now there's your mobile phone, there's wearables, there's things like Alexa, the voice that speaks in the corner of your room, and your attention is fractured across all of these different devices. So brands are really trying to find a way which they can grab your attention, and our attention as people, as individuals, are getting shorter and shorter. I was reading something a couple of days ago that you only have maybe 1.5 seconds to capture someone's attention in the news feed. So that's a real challenge for brands, and they need to use data to say, well, what's relevant, what's meaningful, what's going to excite you and make you click on that story and read a little bit further.
You've tried some experiments to get people, your staff, offline.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to respect. We've asked everybody to respect an email policy of not emailing our colleagues after 8 p.m. at night and before 8 a.m. in the morning. And we don't want people to be constantly checking their phone or feeling, oh, there's a bleep, I need to see what it is and react. I think it's really important to give people time and space outside of work. As we are moving to a more always-on culture, it's important to just give people time and space to not always be thinking about email. If that CEO's emailing you first thing in the morning, that you're not checking your phone at 2 a.m. to see whether you need to respond. So it's ultimately about respect. But also individuals have to take a bit of responsibility about that as well. You know, not having their phone next to their bed, putting it into, sleep mode, even turning it off. We have a thing at Cara as well called the phone hotel. So when our colleagues go away on holiday, they leave their work phone in the phone hotel, and then there's no temptation to check it whilst they're away and having a bit of a break.
Is this always-on culture driving digital advertising these days?
Absolutely. It comes down to attention. You know, we have a very small amount of time in which we can grab the attention of the individual. So we have to design those messages and those alerts and the notifications to, just in the same way that headlines always have done, to kind of go, hey, this is something interesting, have a little bit more. And a lot of the publishers' models and online platforms like Facebook and Google rely upon people seeing that content and clicking through so they can serve advertising content.
Matthew, 322 million people diagnosed with depression worldwide last year. To what extent is our digital addiction responsible for that? I think it's increasingly down to the pace of information and the bombardment that we have around us. You know, this fracturing of media, more content and messages, and not just advertising, but all forms of media saying that you perhaps should be this or you should be that, and increasingly looking at other people's social media. A lot of individuals portray their best selves, or tightly crop their Instagram photos to show the beautiful meal on their plate, but not necessarily the mess in the kitchen all around it. And that's a very human trait. Is you see something which looks fantastic, and then internally you worry that you can never kind of get to that level. That I don't think that's necessarily a technology issue. It's certainly accelerated the amount of messages and content that we see that perhaps we hold ourselves to a unnecessarily high standard about. But equally, again, I think technology and data has the opportunity to reverse some of those trends. There is some brilliant research happening at the moment, and organizations are looking at how they can use personalized data and technology to address issues like depression, mental well-being, insomnia, and actually create tailored programs of therapy and create better connections, remove isolation for certain communities and groups, and actually create more support. Interesting, I was reading about a startup this week which is using artificial intelligence to create a more human dialogue between a machine and an individual that actually gives access to talking therapies for people that wouldn't necessarily have access to that through, say, the NHS or other forms. Matthew, really good to talk to you. Many thanks indeed for being with us.
Thank you.
Finally this week, the bag that was used to carry the very first lunar samples back to Earth was sold for $1.8 million at an auction in New York. Al Jazeera's Kristen Salumi reports.
This bag may not look like a big deal.
The material is actually beta cloth, so that is a material that they use to make the spacesuits.
But it's not so much what it's made of as where it's been.
We have a liftoff.
And what it once held.
Eagle, we got you now. It's looking good, over.
It was part of the Apollo 11 space mission. You can see astronaut Neil Armstrong using it here to collect the very first samples of moon dust brought back to Earth.
It's amazing to me that this bag went unidentified for so long, because it is very clearly labeled as a lunar sample return bag.
While there is plenty of other space memorabilia for sale at Sotheby's auction house, the bag is the only piece of hardware from the first manned moon landing to be privately owned.
The lunar bag took quite the journey before ending up here at Sotheby's auction house. After going to the moon and back, it was lent to a space museum in the Midwest, from which it was eventually stolen. The government got it back, but then mistakenly put it online in an auction, selling it for just $995.
This artifact, we believe, belongs to the American people, NASA said in a statement, and should be on display for the public. But a federal court ruled against returning the bag to the space agency. And NASA no longer has a claim to any personal items carried by the astronauts back from space, with the exception of lunar rocks, thanks to a new law signed by President Obama in 2012. That includes this annotated and signed flight plan from Apollo 13, complete with coffee stains. It's expected to fetch upwards of $30,000.
There have been sales of things before, but I think there was always kind of this worry in the back of people's minds that maybe NASA might take the item from them, and it has occurred. But now that is not possible, so the market is totally changed since then.
The sky's the limit.
The sky is the limit.
That's one small step for man.
And one giant leap for the space memorabilia market.
And that is our show for this week. If you want to comment on anything that you've seen, follow and tweet me. I'm at A Finnegan on Twitter. Use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or you can drop us a line. Counting the cost at aljazeera.net is our email address. There's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our webpage. There you'll find individual reports, links, even entire episodes for you to catch up on. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.